Welcome to the Winner's Circle. I'm Pavle Majerle with Nexus Tech, and today we're cutting through the confusion around the CMMC Phase 2 pause and what defense contractors should actually be doing about it. The two guests here I'm genuinely excited about. First is Don Costanzo. Don is a VCIO here at Nexus Tech, a certified CMMC Registered Practitioner organization, which means he's not just theorizing about this from a white paper. He's in the trenches helping manufacturers and contractors actually build compliant environments. Don, welcome.
Thanks, Pablo. I'm excited to dig in and provide some clarity and smart action.
Thank you for joining us. And joining us as well is Dr. Yvette Burton. Yvette is the founder of Silent Partner Solutions and a CMMC Certified Assessor. But her background is what makes her perspective different. She's a behavioral scientist and a workforce strategist who's held senior roles at Lockheed Martin, IBM, EY, and Deloitte. She looks at cybersecurity through the lens of people who have to live it every day. Yvette, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you and very good timing. And I'm excited about the topic. And I know that you started with the invitation or the discussion around exhaling. And hopefully at the end of our chat, people will also breathe.
So good. I like that. All right. So let's set the table for anyone who's been buried in Q3 and hasn't followed any of the headlines regarding CMMC. So starting with the facts, because again, I think the headlines are genuinely misleading. Don, in plain English, what changed on July 13th? And just as importantly, what didn't?
Sure, Pablo. What changed was the planned move into Phase 2. So the department paused the expansion of mandatory third-party certification while it reviews the entire program. So beginning November 10th, more applicable contracts were expected to require third-party CMMC Level 2 certification as a condition to an award of a contract. So the department paused the transition while it conducts a broader review of the program. But Pavla, more importantly, what didn't change? Contractors still must protect SCI. They still must understand where CUI is and protect CUI. NIST SP 800, 171, SPRS scoring and self-assessments remain very important. Primes may still request an SSP, an SPRS score, and other assurance based on contract and risk. So the certification requirement paused, but the duty of care did not.
Got it. And so I want to use an analogy here that we lean on a lot, and then I'd love to have you both react to it and get your opinions on it. So essentially, it would be like highway patrol pausing a plan to install speed cameras. And the cameras aren't going up, but the speed limit is still going to stay 65. You might still get pulled over by a trooper, which would be, in this instance, like a government spot check, or get in a wreck, which would be kind of like a breach. And the penalties at the end of the day are exactly the same. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that analogy.
Sure. I think the analogy holds up pretty well. Pausing cameras does not eliminate the speed limit. So to the extent that the speed camera is the third-party assessment and the speed limit is the underlying contract and security obligation, it's a fair enough analogy. Where I do see it breaking down is cybersecurity is not a single number, like a 65 mile per hour speed limit, but cybersecurity is an operating discipline that functions every single day. So access reviews, vulnerability remediation, training, incident records, an up-to-date SSP, and logs accumulate over time. So you might be able to clean up an office right before the assessor arrives, but you can't create a year logs over the weekend.
That's brilliant, and it's a good metaphor. The notion that a camera is driving a driver's behavior is a good way to think about the pause, because the pause is on certification and the assessment mechanism, right? So if the certification is a validation of how you're behaving from a cyber perspective and compliance, we just went from a scheduled exam to a pop-up quiz, right? So your responsibilities, and so you can, in that frame, you could see why it's putting more onus on the part of the DIB like primes, who now have increased responsibility for due diligence to assure that their supply chain is safe, with these predictable mechanisms, to not having having pop-up quizzes. And so your ability to be ready, what you're responsible for knowing, what you have to demonstrate and execute hasn't changed. So I think it's a brilliant analogy.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thanks for the feedback on that. And so here's what worries me in general with all of this as well. Pause creates a psychological permission slip, I guess you could say. Yvette, this is your wheelhouse, the human side. When people feel like the pressure is off, what actually happens inside an organization?
Right. So it's interesting, because a pause is a pause, but a strategic pause is a business lever. So, what is interesting is how people deal with change, the importance of agility as a competency, not only as a leader individual to pivot and to adjust and anticipate, but also, what that looks like the organization as they navigate the ecosystem. So it was foreseeable that when a new leader comes in, whether that's the CIO at the DOD, DOW, leaders come in, they try to get their head around the surroundings. They have their own unique questions. It's not a continuance of, and so the dynamics in the ecosystem, the changes, the pause is not inconceivable. Those of us that have been on the CMMC journey have witnessed its evolution, its reframing, and we don't know yet what its next iteration will be, but we know that the fundamental needs are there. And there's a lot of people in the ecosystem, some that are going to say, independent of this mechanism, I'm going to make sure that I adhere to a standard while the government figures out. There's others that have, from a very human perspective, have invested time and money in certifications and realignment of their business activities. And so therefore this pause that can feel like a loss of control is resulting in, and rightfully so, expression of anxiety around uncertainty. But, it's really important at this time that leadership see this as a strategic pause, that the practitioners and the organizations use this 2 week of ambiguity to prioritize, to be aware of signals in the environment, to be self-defining and ready. So it's much less about relying on what the outcome of this 60-day pause is, as much as it is an opportunity to get your house in order, to get your documentation in order, to talk about, given that this won't be the last time our organization needs to ebb and flow to align with market or regulations, what is the underlying opportunity that makes you feel like you can be more in control and ready to be able to answer the question at the end of this 60 days, what does it mean for us? And what do we need now to do with our partners, with our teams? And so, yes, and that's a culture, right? Culture can feel like soft marshmallows, but if you look at cultures as attitudes and behaviors and how folks team and their appetite for risk, it can be the softest brick wall you run into when you're in a space like ours and navigating these landscapes.
That's great. And I love that metaphor. And to your point, the softest brick wall you run into. I mean, at this point in time, even so, with the audit being paused, the consequences aren't exactly hypothetical. Don, do you mind walking us through the real exposure that's sitting here today? What are some of the risks if people don't proceed with the CMMC level of compliance?
Yeah, I do want to make a point on Yvette's comments. I really like the comment about leadership should see it as a strategic pause. And I would also build on that and say leadership should communicate that down to, management and lower levels. What we do see sometimes on the implementation side with a pause, we see maybe task and due dates shift. We see meetings being canceled. We see the SSP become out of date and not match what the real environment is. So I do think it's really important for leadership to communicate that it's simply a pause. We're going to continue to maintain our cybersecurity posture. But with respect to the remaining exposure, I would really put them into three categories. There's this representation risk, a cybersecurity risk, and then a contractual or commercial risk. So on the representation side, SPRS scores and self-assessments still must be accurate and supportable. So if you're saying that you have a control that's implemented, it should mean that the company can show who owns the control and that you have the evidence to prove it. And knowingly unsupported or inflated claims can move beyond an IT issue and create contractual or potential False Claims Act exposure. On cyber, the risk exists. Threat actors didn't pause. DIB companies still hold intellectual property, technical drawings, credentials, sensitive program information, and they do have access into larger supply chains. Contractors are still going to have for DFARS obligations, remain current with their SSP, have a defensible SPRS score, and at the NIST 800-177 control level, be able to have evidence that prove that control has been implemented. So a good point to make here, Pavle, is that self-assessment does not mean self-exemption.
Got it. And I appreciate that. And with that as well, I think naturally flowing into that conversation is talking about the people that are writing the checks for many of the organizations. And those are the primes, right? So Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop, a lot of them are going to be remaining legally liable for their entire supply chain. Yvette, considering your deep experience with the primes, do you mind walking us through, add some color to how they're handling these situations?
Yeah. So, if you sit in the chair of the prime and think about their, before the pause, they clearly articulated that there would be implementation of a standard and at a rate that wasn't commensurate with the government. So they've kind of, their appetite for risk is reflected as not much, not wanting to have a lot of risk in their supply chain and to have visibility into that. And so, and it's a business decision, right? So it's not just technical configurations. It is how are they reducing the risk across thousands of suppliers at all different sizes, because they are responsible for demonstrating that they've done their level best to mitigate and manage risk. And so when you're talking about risk, it's a financial decision. Yes, False Claims Act is a real liability, but risk also introduces to the business lots of costs. And so that is very much managed by the prime. And so if you sit in their seat and you look at the number of organizations or subs in their chain that can introduce risk to them that goes beyond their appetite, beyond just CMMC, it's not a paperwork or a compliance exercise to them. They don't want to inherit unnecessary risk on their own books. And so, a lot of subs underestimate that, why are the subs having or implementing standards that are independent or supersede. And it's for those reasons when you look about it and when you look at this as a business decisions. And so the degree to which beyond CMMC compliance, you can articulate as a sub how you are helping that prime with their financial objectives or growth objectives is differentiating. It shouldn't be a headache. It should be an opportunity for you to not just sit in the compliance bucket and to really prove your business value as a partner.
Thank you. And I think that's a fantastic take. And so if pausing for these organizations on their end isn't necessarily, it's not the right move, what would be the right move? I don't want all this to be doom, right? So what's the opportunity in this window that we can push forward and provide as an antidote to the subprimes?
Sure. I do think that the pause is an opportunity, but it's not really a permission to stop focusing on cybersecurity. So the pause can make sense if the program needs to become leaner and more practical, especially for small and mid-sized DIB companies. But you don't want to keep spending mechanically against an obsolete deadline. Keep doing the security work that has high value and use a credible successor framework comes along. Then as an organization, you'll be ready to apply it. So in Nexus Tech, we look at 3 key phases. We look at readiness, we look at remediation, and then we look at audit readiness. On the readiness side, during this pause, contractors or organizations can locate their CUI, confirm where data flows into your ecosystem, where it rests in your ecosystem, and where it reaches out to either third-party vendors or email or ERP. So you want to identify your CUI, you want to identify all your systems and people and scope. It's a good time. It's actually a really good time to locate your SSP. So if you can't find it, then you kind of got a sense of your starting point. But really, it's a good time to validate the system security plan. Take a look at your SPRS score. Are you comfortable with the fact that you can back it up? And then your SSP should have identified meaningful gaps that you can work against. So that's the readiness component we look at. On the remediation side, it's time to start addressing these high-risk weaknesses, implement controls that haven't been implemented, update your policies and procedures, and then start tidying up your documentation. So use the pause to become more precise, not more passive.
Those are all excellent. And making it a strategic pause, if I put on my assessor hat, where I've seen organizations seeking certification struggle as they race towards the deadline of getting certified by the November date, was not really being intentional about who they were partnering with, whether it's partnering with an MSP or a vendor that overpromised and underdelivered, and they walked into assessments not prepared, blindsided by claims that their RPO or MSP made, and they were kind of frustrated about in money that they invested, the time they invested, not having the right scope, doing too much with regards to the assessment, paying for readiness services without clarity on ready for what. So as we go now, so as we redefine that, and metaphorically, it's kind of like the difference between, when you're at the bar and it's last call and you kind of like look around, who am I going to date? And it's whoever's standing after how many drinks you've had versus, and marrying that person versus taking your time, being clear about what you need, what a culture fit looks like. So use the pause as a time to have the right trusted value-based partners, not only on the readiness side, but on the C3PO side. Different C3POs have different assessors, different ways of engaging. So pick a partner or partners that are right for you and use the time to be more discerning.
That was great. I really appreciate that. And so to that point, as we start to build out plans and use this pause strategically for an organization, Nexus Tech talks a lot about tangible cyber hygiene, the brilliant basics, instead of more of the bureaucratic paperwork side. Don, what are the high impact moves, the things that matter whether or not an auditor ever shows up?
Yeah, so Pavle, good question. I really do like the term brilliant basics. The biggest security improvements are usually not the most exotic. So number one, again, back to knowing your data, identify where your CUI enters, lives, moves, and leaves within the organization, within the environment. This can include email, your endpoints, your ERP, your engineering systems, your backups, and your suppliers. Number two, use a phishing-resistant MFA where it's practical. Implement a least privileged ideas within your organization, and really have a strong access governance. In terms of inventory and technical debt, keep a up-to-date inventory of all your IT assets, retire unsupported software, get rid of redundant data stores, eliminate shadow IT. Next is network segmentation. So we want to limit the lateral movement and shrink the blast radius. If we get a bad actor in, we don't want to have them start moving laterally. You should also consider a CUI enclave or a VDI solution. You do need to use a modern EDR and have a continual risk-based vulnerability management plan, right? Identify risk, but have a documented risk register, and then have a periodic plan to start identifying those vulnerabilities. So it's about readiness assessment, remediation and documentation, and then getting audit ready. And really the goal is not to have the largest, the biggest compliant environment. It's the smallest practical environment that protects the information and then more importantly, supports the business.
Thank you for that. And Yvette, the best architected system in the world has humans clicking links. How do you build security that survives contact with actual employees?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something like awareness training, which is a part of the standard for CMMC, but just cybersecurity more broadly. And I'm always taken aback by the amount of people that think they're ready for an assessment and they've underestimated the weight of awareness training and role-based training. If you fail that requirement, you fail. So, but awareness training fails for a simple reason. You can't train your way out of a design problem. Just having generic, training, on any topic that's not contextualized or brought into focus so a person understands, given their role, what is their responsibility from a security perspective, and not in a moment of crisis or a moment of neglect, but how do you, kind of like when you're driving down the road, you don't remember how you got someplace, you have behaviors that automatically kick in. It's this, you want to get to the same footing for your people around awareness and good security behavior. So if following a good security practice requires an employee to remember a rule from a slide deck, it'll fail under real workload. So the clicking of the links or taking shortcuts in a environment where folks are stressed out, awareness training in order to prevent those instances really needs to be baked into how work actually gets done. So it's the path of least resistance and it survives contact with a busy, distracted, real human being.
Excellent. Thank you. And so I've got one last question, last big one, and I would like for you both to kind of give your take on this. If the replacement framework drops in September with less warning than phase 2 gave, what does the contractor who wins the next cycle look like today?
Yeah, good question, Pavle. I think the winner isn't the company that spend the most money. It's the company that understands its environment and can prove what they say is true. So the company has already identified their CUI in the processes. They've identified where it lives, who has access to it, which systems and third parties are in scope, and why. It knows which controls operate, what gaps remain, and what evidence supports both the system security plan as well as the SPRS score. It probably necessarily has reduced the scope of the CUI and has already addressed the highest risk areas. When the new framework arrives, it adjusts the existing program instead of starting from a blank page. So the contractor who wins is ready either way. No fire drill would be required.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would add that the contractor who wins the next cycle isn't the one that has guessed the technical requirements correctly. It'll be the one whose leadership treated this ambiguity as normal operating conditions instead of a fire drill and kept moving and kept their people bought in and stayed close to their trusted partners and used the quiet window to get stronger. And that's not a compliance posture, that's a growth posture. And when the framework lands in September, or if it's paused even further, that's the company that's ready either way because their leadership already proved it can operate under uncertainty. And that's the muscle. CMMC is just where it's showing up this year.
Excellent. Yvette, Don, thank you. This was exactly the reset a lot of people listening needed. Here's my ask for everyone watching. Don't let the quiet fool you. If you've paused, unpause. If you've never started, the window is the cheapest head start you'll ever get. NexusTek partners with Silent Partner Solutions to help businesses assess, understand where they're staying at this point in time, help you get and achieve CMMC compliance. So getting your SSP and your controls actually on their footing today. And if you're interested, you'd like to get just a quick scoping call, get an understanding of, okay, what do I need to do so I can avoid the fire drill? We'll drop a link in the description here to visit nexustech.com/CMMC. And again, whether the new framework lands in September or your prime just asks for proof next quarter, the goal is to be ready either way. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.